I think the recent market corrections last May and June and the one we just saw recently were very short and not deep at all, no lessons learned, and I think they may have compounded the problem by everyone feeling that there's no risk here and the sky is the limit. So what I would urge now is for investors and lenders to be cautious and not to let down their credit standards as we move forward. Going on to China, I think that it's fair to say that China is very much a part, obviously, of the global economy, which it was not in 1997 at the Asian financial crisis. And what happens in the world economy affects China, and what happens in China affects the world. Just witness what happened a few weeks ago with the volatility in the Shanghai market and what that set off. I think that the economic problem that China is facing today is overinvestment in certain industries and a general overheating of the economy. We saw this with the figures from the first quarter, where China grew at over 11%, 11.1%, and inflation was recorded at 3.3%. There's an old saying in China that growth between 7 and 8% is great. Growth between 8 and 10% starts to become a problem, and growth over 10% is a real problem. And so we will see how the administration handles this. Up to now, what they've used are measures called administrative measures, particularly in the construction and housing area. Also, the People's Bank of China has raised reserve requirements, raised interest rates, but none of this seems to have done much good. So it'll be interesting to see, with the tremendous growth in money supply that we're also seeing in China, what the government will now do. My own feeling is we have the 17th Party Congress coming up in October, and I don't think a lot of drastic measures will be taken because obviously everyone wants to be in good shape for that particular event. So I think that we will see more of the same at least through October. After October, it'll be interesting to see. Will China be able to maintain its solid growth record without experiencing temporary setbacks due to overheating or other causes? I think that China and its leadership understand what needs to be done, and although there may be brief periods of difficulty, I think at the end they will do what is necessary. But there are challenges for the new leadership, President Hu Jintao and Premier Wen Jiabao, and I would just mention a few of them. Increased consumption is necessary as a driver of economic growth, rather than the dependence we've seen over the last decade in export-driven growth. A greater awareness and concern for environmental conservation, I think, is now a major goal of the new leadership. A need to step up efforts to strengthen social security and welfare. This is why you have such a large savings rate in China, because this does not exist. So I think efforts are being made to emphasize this. The need to continue to promote entrepreneurship and technology innovation in the SME and venture capital markets. I think very, very important. One of the most important commitments made by China in its 11th five-year plan was to raise domestic consumption rather than rely on export-led growth. I think this is key to a lot of issues, including the trade issues between China and ourselves. If successful, I think this will go a long way to giving China the secure base it needs for growth over the next decade. I think this will also see a reduction in personal savings, increased imports and expenditures abroad, less reliance on exports, increased government consumption and in providing social security benefits which the country needs. A more flexible exchange rate, interest rates and capital flows and taxation policies also must accompany the changes I am mentioning. In the area of environmental protection, there's a growing recognition that the rate at which China uses up its natural resources will not be able to continue. As an example, China used 15% of the world's total energy last year to produce 5.5% of the world's GDP. Obviously, that is not sustainable, and the leadership in China understands that. So I think that we're going to see much more enforcement of environmental laws on the books. And I think that means that Beijing will be pushing hard on provincial governors and municipal leaders at the local level to implement the laws on the books which have not been done. And I think this is a major change and something that was mentioned very strongly last month in Beijing at the State Council meeting. I think also what we are looking at here, which I think is very, very important, is also an effort to find alternative sources of energy. China is already one of the world's largest users of alternative sources of energy. Witness what they're doing in the dam building in the country. Now, some of that crosses over with the environment, so there has to be some sort of balance there. On Social Security and welfare, China needs to make greater efforts and emphasis to improve the pension system. Also with basic medical health care, and also in developing more its educational system. I think there is a growing realization that although China graduates a lot of engineers and scientists, more needs to be done in the innovative side on venture capital and entrepreneurship. And certainly a group like this, which is made up in large part by entrepreneurs, is a source to help China in this regard. The whole area, as I mentioned, of SMEs and venture capital, these were areas that were emphasized in this meeting in Beijing last month. And I understand John Cheng, who's a member of yours and a friend of mine, was there with me. And he will, if he's speaking, he certainly will be commenting on that area. And he spoke about his own experiences in Silicon Valley.